Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of White Belt MMA podcast. And it is an absolute honor to have one of the voices of the UFC, Brendan Fitzgerald. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing great, Gio. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, man, definitely. Like I said, man, it's like when I sent you a message a couple weeks ago, I just kind of threw my shot out there. I wasn't expecting
Uh-huh.
you to actually reply to my message. So when you actually said yes to doing an interview, and honestly, I was so happy, and it's an absolute honor to be talking to you, my man.
Thanks, man. I try to do these as much as I can. I like to think it wasn't too long ago, but as the years go by, it's getting longer and longer that I was a young up and coming broadcaster that was doing the same thing. Trust me, YouTube wasn't as big and podcasts weren't as accessible and stuff, but I was still just sending out emails and trying to make phone calls and trying to connect with people whose jobs I ultimately wanted one day. So happy to do it, man.
Yeah, definitely, man. And like you said, man, not so long ago, you're in this situation that I'm in, right? Like I'm looking at you, and then like, every time I see you calling a UFC fight, like I'm just there, like, man, Brendan has the coolest job ever. Like
Yeah.
seeing these crazy fights like every weekend, and so like I want to go all the way back. So for most people, like for me, right? Like it's one of those things. It's like you watch sports as a kid, and then it's that like you'll be playing with your friends, and you're kind of like in your whether it be out loud or in your head, you're kind of announcing like the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, so was that the same thing for you, like, as a kid?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Knee hockey with my brother, and it's like you're announcing it. Like, I think if you love sports and you watch it on TV, like ultimately it's the same as humming along to a song that you like. You're going to notice how it sounds, and that's part of the experience, right? The senses that are involved are just something that's going to stick with you. So what you love about sports and the big games and the big moments and the big shots and all that other stuff, like there's a soundtrack to that. And if you're there, then it's the big roar of the crowd. But if you're watching on TV, it's the crowd and the announcer going crazy and the iconic calls of the big moments that live on. We all remember our team's big moments, or our the big things that we remember as a sports fan. We remember how it sounded. And yeah, so when I was a kid, I just, I found out it was a job, and that was it, man. I just wanted to do it. Always wanted to work in sports. And when you grow up a little bit and you figure out you can't be a world-class athlete, what's the next best thing?
Yeah, no, definitely. And for you, right? Like you said, it's like you get to that moment that you're kind of like realize you're like, okay, so I'm definitely not going to make it to the pros. So like you said, like what's the next best thing? So once you get to that moment, right? Like I'm guessing like you started like really getting into like watching like those like talk shows, like let's say like NFL, NFL Live or like anything like that they had back in the day. So like were you like the first one like coming up to like among your friends that started watching that? So like, as like everyone else is watching like cartoons or watching like whatever, like watching movies or whatever like that, you were just like
Yeah.
watching like your sports show. So like, was it weird being that kid, or was it, like you kind of had like your
No.
friends? Yeah.
Yeah, no, like I mean, I come from the Boston area, about an hour south of Boston. So pro sports are huge there.
Yeah.
Like kids love sports just like their dads do. And so, I had a really good group of friends that were into watching sports. I probably was in tune to like the craft of it a little bit more. Like I would watch Sports Center. It wouldn't just be like, cool, the Red Sox won. It would be like, that was funny how he did the highlights. Like the anchors on Sports Center were like comedians, and they were like entertainers, especially back in the day, because you couldn't just go online and find the scores and the highlights to anything you wanted. You had to watch Sports Center if you wanted the highlights of all the different things. So yeah, I mean, I probably watched more Sports Center than my friends did, and more ESPN than my friends did. And I think what I did was I paid attention to what I liked about it, and ultimately like was on the path to like wanting to do it someday, just always interested in it. And yeah, I mean, Sports Center was on before school. You wake up at 6 in the morning so you can watch an hour of Sports Center before you go to school. I mean, that was me. So always into it for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm on the same boat too. I remember like I was like in middle school, elementary school, be eating like my bowl of cereal, just watching
Yeah.
like the highlights of like your like my favorite team is the New York Giants, even though I'm from the Boston area as well.
Where are
So
you
like,
from?
well, I was born in New York, but I moved here
Yeah.
when I was 10. So like I moved right into enemy territory. So like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so like
Where'd you move?
Yeah, so I actually moved to Revere, Massachusetts. So it's like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, legitimately like 10 minutes away from, like, not even
Revere.
less. Yeah,
I
yeah.
would have never guessed. You don't sound like you're from Revere.
No, 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 no. Like I said, it's like, oh, first 10 years of my life to live in New York, and I'm like
Yeah. So
legitimately
you're
getting back.
established as a human and then you go to Boston. Yeah.
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 It sucks though, man. Like when I first moved here, that was when the Giants won like their first Super Bowl against the Patriots. So like the fact that I couldn't be in the
You
city
couldn't be
and
happy.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. You
yeah,
couldn't enjoy it as much.
I had to be on the defense because, like, you know how Patriots fans are, right?
I know. I know.
Yeah, man. But hey, for you though, like you're originally from Boston, but you had to move to go to New York for college, Ethica College. So for what came to that decision? Because, like, obviously you have Syracuse there. So like,
Yeah.
what came to down to that decision to go to Ethica?
So my sister went to school at Colgate, which is a small liberal arts school in upstate New York too. So when she was looking, she's 2 years older than me. So when she was looking at schools, like it was, I knew that I was going to be looking at schools soon after. So the upstate New York circuit was something that I liked. I don't know, like if I had to do it over again, like which you can't, like I might have chose differently. I probably would have chose warmer weather, number one,
Mhm,
or like I viewed like Boston as too close. You know what I mean? I didn't want to drive an hour to school. I kind of wanted to go away to school.
mhm,
And yeah, Syracuse is there too. The thing that turned me off about trying for Syracuse is like it just seemed too big. Um, like I viewed it as like, okay, if this is the place to be a sports broadcaster, that means that there's going to be a lot of sports broadcasters here. Not that I didn't think I could be good enough to like be one of the better ones, but if you show up at Syracuse radio station as a student wanting to like be the play-by-play announcer for their basketball games, well, you're showing up with 30 other 40 other kids that want to
right,
do the same thing. And so I'm just like, well, my percentages aren't good on like getting real world work with that, like getting on the air. Like from what I understood at the time, like in Syracuse, if you went there as a freshman, you'd have to wait until you were a junior to like be on the air in some form on their student TV and radio. And
mhm,
with Ithaca, it still was a very well respected, journalism school, communications program in general. And it was still like in upstate New York. Ithaca is a great college town. And I was on the radio 3 weeks into my freshman year, like just showed up for the club. It wasn't like crazy to try to get on the air. And so I viewed it as a good move where I could start learning like hands on, like learn how to be a broadcaster by being a broadcaster with these extracurricular clubs, like from day one. And that was the case. And who knows? I mean, if I had gone to Syracuse, would my experience would have been different? The benefits of going to schools like that is you're covering big sports. So
mhm.
you're coming out of college with like, hey, I cover ACC basketball, right?
Yeah.
Or if you go down now, I said the weather thing, like University of Miami has a good broadcasting school, as I understand it. So does Arizona State. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like I might have tried one of those, and then you're covering big time sports. But ultimately, with where I was at the time, like Ithaca was the right choice. Their broadcasting school was, again, it's highly respected. There's a lot of great broadcasters that came out of there, and I'm happy to be one of them.
Definitely, man. And like, as you're coming out of college, because I'm a senior in college right now, so like I'm kind of like in like pure, I'm not gonna say pure panic mode, but I'm kind of like, oh my god, like school's about to be over for me. I'm about to enter
Yeah,
the real world now. So for you,
yeah.
like your senior year, like were you just sending out tapes to local news stations? Like for you, like
Yeah.
was it in your mind was like, okay, I'm gonna have to move to like a smaller market to get a job, or you're kind of like one of those that like in your head, like started into it, you're like, oh, I'm gonna get a big job coming right out of college, and then life hits
No.
you.
Yeah, I
Mhm,
think if you expect to get a big job out of college, that you're setting yourself up for
mhm,
disappointment. I always thought I'd lived in Montana, and it turned out to be Wyoming. But I knew I was going to have to move to the sticks. I didn't know. I don't, for some reason I always just thought west, but there are small markets in the east. Like you can nab a job in Burlington, Vermont. You know what I mean? Like you can, like Hagerstown, Maryland is a smaller market and whatever. Like there are jobs where they're within driving distance of big cities, and there's small markets where you can get started. But for me, I was just like, I'm gonna have to go to Iowa or North Dakota or Montana or Wyoming or whatever. I just figured that those are the markets that are really small. It's like you got to ask yourself if you're willing to do that. And it was never a question for me. So I was applying to all of those jobs in all of those small markets. And the thing that's really tough is that just because you're willing to go to a market like that doesn't mean it's easy to get that job. There's still
Mhm.
not a lot of jobs out there. And then even when there are ones that open up, there's a lot of competition for them because there's a lot of people like you that want the dream job, that want to cover sports, and ultimately it's got to start somewhere. So yeah, like I didn't get that job in Wyoming for a couple of years. Like I was sending out my resume tape after college for, gosh, like a full year, and then full 2 years basically, and then ended up taking a job behind the scenes in Phoenix, and then worked behind the scenes, made a new tape, and then ultimately got my first on-air job like 3 years after I graduated college. But I think my biggest advice is to get yourself in the door. Don't hold out for just an on-air job. I think at first I was like, I'm going to send out for an on-air job, and that's what I'm sticking to because that's what I want to do. And it was very short-sighted. Like, you'd be well off if you're in Boston, for instance, just try to go print scripts somewhere, try to do something in a newsroom or at a sports network or at a radio station day to day, so that you have like just this connection to the business. And
Mhm.
then from there, you can make your way on air. And so it took me a little longer, but ultimately, once you get in, that's the hard part. Going up is a challenge of a different sort, but at least you're in it and you can kind of figure it out.
Yeah, and like you said, it's like for you, like you kind of had to take a step back and not think about being the on air jobs and apply for those jobs. You actually have to go behind the scenes. So like when you're doing that, like was it like you said, like was your mindset kind of like at first you're kind of bummed out, and then so you're like, I mean, at least I have a foot in the door, or at the same
Yeah,
time it's kind of like one of those things. It's kind of like, hey, like you said, it's like I know I knew from the start that it was gonna be a grind to work my
right.
way up. And yeah, so was that the mindset for you, or? Mhm.
Yeah. So, like, um, when I was out of college, I was looking for a job, and then I met my now wife. I met my girlfriend in Las Vegas, and so I moved out to Las Vegas after I graduated college. Oddly enough, I now live back in Las Vegas and work for the UFC. But so I lived out in Las Vegas, and I was sending my tape all around, and it wasn't bad when I took that job behind the scenes because I had given myself the shot. I had a couple of phone interviews and a couple interviews for these on-air jobs, and they didn't pan out. So it's like, it's tough when you don't get something like that because you're like, oh, when's the next opportunity going to even come? Like, it's really good to be a finalist for an on-air job, and then if you come in second place, then you're back to square one. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. So it's a little discouraging for that. But once I got a job in TV and it started, I was like excited. I was just like, okay. Because the biggest thing was, when I was in college, my resume tape kind of sucked. Like, everybody's resume tape is not good coming out of college, right?
Mhm.
But even worse for me, like, it wasn't even good for me. Like, I was just like, I didn't get enough opportunities. I didn't have enough reps. Like, I was sending out this tape that I wasn't that proud of. You
Mhm.
at least want your resume to be something that you're like, I, I'd go to bat with this resume. And for my tape, it's like, it's just what I had. It's what I was able to get on tape during my time in college. And it wasn't as easy back then. Like, you couldn't just set up a phone and shoot fake sports reports in front of a green screen like you can now. And like all
Yeah.
these different production techniques, or have a YouTube channel, or all this stuff. So I felt like hamstrung at the material that I was sending out. And so I was really excited to work in Phoenix behind the scenes because I was like, I can meet the people that are these sports anchors in Phoenix, and I can like establish a connection with them, which I did. And I'm still friends with one of them today, all these years later. Like, he's been great to me. And I was able to make a new resume tape, because you float around, you're behind the scenes, and you're out shooting something at like a Arizona Cardinals practice. And it's just like, if you ask the photog if you want to shoot a couple of stand-ups in front for your demo tape, they'll be like, yeah, sure, jump in front there, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. They'll even help you out.
Mhm.
You're a good worker, you're a good kid, they want to help, people want to help. And so then I made a new resume tape in Phoenix, got on the desk and anchored something when the studio was available a little bit too, and the control room was like, rolled the highlights and all that for me. And after I started sending that tape out, I got my job in a month or two, because it was like, I was like proud of that resume tape, and I had good guidance from
Yeah.
professionals instead of just like teachers in college that were kind of just kind of teaching it on a broader scale. I could like ask the sports anchor, what should I do on
Yeah.
this resume tape? And then he helped me. And then, lo and behold, I get a job shortly after.
Yeah, and then like that moment you go first on air though, like were there a
Yeah.
little bit of the jitters in the stomach? You're just kind of like, oh my God,
Yeah,
what's happening now?
it's funny. Like I moved up to Wyoming, and I was like in a week of training. There was the guy that was leaving, the guy that I was replacing, but he like trained me for the week. So I had like a week on the job without going on air yet. I was able to learn, and like I felt, and then it's an entry level market. So you look around at like the news anchors that were there and like the sports anchors at the other station, whatever. And I was
Mhm.
just like, oh, I'll be fine here. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah,
don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but I was just like, I'm gonna be good. Like I'll step up and I might even be better. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So I wasn't nervous about like not being able to do it. But it's funny because I remember like going on air and thinking like, oh, I'm not nervous at all. Like I wasn't, and I was a little bit like in the moment, but I was just like, no, I'm crushing this. This is awesome. But then of course you go back 6 months later and you look at your first time on air. And now if I went back, I'd be like, oh my goodness, you know? And it's
yeah.
just like, yeah, there's like you just speak with a different comfort level. You know, when you're new, you're trying to like read the words instead of like inject personality. So yeah, no, it's natural to be nervous. It's your body's way of telling you that something's important. And so that's what I dealt with. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and I'll be honest, though, that's definitely one of my favorite sayings. That was like when you are nervous, that's how you know it means something to you, right? Like
Yeah, that's
if
exactly right, man.
yeah, but yeah, dude. And then instead of that, like, I actually wanted to ask you about this one story. I mean, I've heard you like say this story a bunch of times in other interviews, but like I just found it so cool because it's like it's your first break. It's the legal seafood story with your mom, and
Yeah.
then the
Yeah.
and making your way
No, no,
back
no, it's
home
not
to
legal seafood. It's seafood Sam's
Seafood Sam's. I'm sorry
on
about
the
that.
Cape. Yeah, 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 yeah. Just trying to get it right. The Cape
Yeah,
Cod Institution.
definitely. So yeah, dude. So for everyone watching us, tell the story, and because like every time I hear it, it's so cool. Legitimately, like
Yeah,
it's crazy how life works, right? It's like it's a way
it
of bringing you back
is.
to your home state.
It really is. So I was working in Wyoming at the time and just, still entry level job and trying to make it all happen. And my mom and her friend went to Seafood Sam's on the Cape in Sandwich, which is where I'm from. And there was a guy sitting at the bar and he had a t-shirt on, and it was a bar t-shirt. It was like the dugout. The bar wasn't around when I went to Ithaca, but the dugout bar, Ithaca, New York, it said on his
Mhm.
t-shirt. So my mom's friend is chatty as hell, and she went right up to him, and was just like, "Oh, are you from Ithaca? Her son went to Ithaca College, and blah blah blah." And he had gone to Ithaca College, and so they started just chatting more. And oh yeah, my son went to Ithaca. He's in TV, and the guy's like, "Oh, I'm in TV." And oh yeah, he does the sports anchoring out at the NBC station in Casper, Wyoming. And he's just like, "Oh, I'm the assistant news director at Fox 25." In
It's
Boston.
crazy.
And this guy named Paul McGonigal. And so all of a sudden, it's just like, talk about somebody to meet. I mean, that's better than even meeting the news director, because the
Yeah.
assistant news director at big markets are the ones that are kind of scouting for talent a little bit. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
they're in a different role in the station. It's just like they're more involved in the day-to-day operations of the staff and who's doing what. So it was just you couldn't have asked a better person to run into in terms of trying to establish a connection back in Boston, especially at that station, because the sports job at that station was like a revolving door. Like people would be in and out every
Yeah.
few years for a time. Like Steve Burton and Dan Roach have been at Channel 4 since I was like, 7. You know
Uh
what I
huh.
mean? And they're still there. They're just still there. And the guys at Channel 5, like Mike Lynch, and they were just there forever, from
It's
like
like they're staples.
85 to like 2018.
Yeah.
So I just never thought that there would be a place for me to fit in the Boston market. And like turns out that had this connection. So the next time I was visiting home, I went in and showed him my resume tape, was able to like go into that studio, and I was wide-eyed of like, wow, this is what a big market studio is like. This is the Boston. And imagine working here covering Boston sports. That'd be incredible. And and then like a few years later, yeah, I would just kind of keep in touch with them little by little. This is what they mean when they say network, right?
Mhm.
It's like, what should I do? Network. And when you're a kid of 22, you're just like, screw you. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Like what the hell do you mean network? How do I do it? But you're doing it right now. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? And it's just this abstract concept where it's like all you got to do is just be friendly and work hard and try to make the right connections, and people will want to help and be nice and be thankful and keep in touch and whatever. So that's what I was trying to do with this connection. And sure enough, a few years later, they needed a sports anchor. I was working in Texas at the time, and had to buy out of my contract to get up to Boston, and it was worth it. And all happened at a seafood Sam's, because they're on a random weeknight in the summer. They met the right guy who was sitting at the bar, and got that break to work in Boston.
And that's insane. Like we said earlier, it's crazy how life works, right? It's
Yeah.
like stuff that like you would see out of a movie actually happening. And
Yeah.
yeah. And you get back to your home state, and dude, now you're covering, your home teams, the teams you grew up watching. So like, from like your time here in Boston, like covering Boston sports, like what was your favorite moment? Like if you had to work on a segment, was it whether it be for the Patriots, Bruins, or Red Sox? Like what was your favorite moment like working here in the Boston market?
I think, it's tough to pick one, because during that stretch, oddly enough, the Patriots didn't go to the Super Bowl while I was home. I worked there for 2 years, and the Patriots didn't go to the Super Bowl for those 2 years. They went like before, and they went right after. Right after I left, and they beat the Seahawks, and then they beat the Falcons and whatever. But when I was there, they lost to the Broncos when Peyton Manning was there in the AFC title game, and they lost to the Ravens when the Ravens then went and beat the 49ers. But so it wasn't a Patriots memory. The Red Sox won the World Series in 2013. And looking back on it, that was very cool. In the middle of it, it was hell. I mean, it was like we had, for a big market station, we had pretty little resources. And it was just like, out of 31 days in October, I worked like 28 of them, and you're up all night and you're traveling and whatever. And it's one of those things like, again, I'm going to Red Sox games to work, right? So don't feel bad for me. But I just remember in the middle, I was so tired. And then like when you get back to the big city, it's like, cool, I'm at this game, but like sometimes the way the bosses are like demanding things, being jerk, whatever, because the eyeballs are on sports. And it was just kind of like a sticky situation. I'm just like, I know I'm going to look back on this and be like, this is incredible. I covered the Red Sox winning the World Series. And not only that, they won it at Fenway Park, which the other ones they've all run on the road. So it was very special, but in the middle of it, I'm just like, I can't wait for this to be over. I also loved when the Bruins went to the Stanley Cup final in 2013. That was because, hockey was my first love as a sport, and hockey players are generally the friendliest and most down to earth of the pro athletes. And so just for that to all come together, and even though they didn't win, but just to like have that run through the playoffs and be able to go to the Garden like every other night for like 4 rounds of the playoffs was just, that was really cool. I mean, playoff hockey to me is just the best. And, baseball is fun, and the World Series is fun, and the Red Sox are certainly historic, and Fenway Park is like nothing else. But, that Bruins run in 2013 was pretty cool too.
And like you said, something about the energy in TD Garden too, especially when it comes to playoff
like
hockey,
when
insane.
when it's at its height, there's nothing better. The sport moves so fast that you can't blink. The games are going to overtime, and it's just insane. And the hockey fans are kind of what I identify with in that case.
Definitely. And before we go on to like the UFC side of your story, like I gotta have to ask you this, for everyone from Boston is gonna hate on me if I don't ask you this question. Favorite restaurant to eat in Boston, like whenever you're here or whenever you were here working in the Boston market?
Yeah. It's sad that the Fours on Canal Street closed.
Yeah.
Very sad. That's a historic spot. So when I saw that closed, I was just like, man, it's not like I went there all the time, because we lived outside the city. I lived in Weymouth for a year, and then we lived down in Scituate. So we're like suburbs. But Boston restaurant, I think to really, I don't know if this will give me credit with the locals or not, but I'm just like the 99, man. Like,
dude,
the 99 was my spot. Like, and it's just, it doesn't matter if it was on the Cape when I'm like hanging at home with like my family a little bit, meeting my brother at a 99 or whatever in Plymouth, if we're like grabbing around to golf, and then after go to the 99. And then me and my wife used to go to the 99 in Hingham on 3A and play bar trivia on Thursday nights. And gotta tell you, man, I mean, it's just can't miss. It's just the good old fashioned place where the neighborhood gathers. It's kind of like a Fridays or an Applebee's, right? But it's just, it's very uniquely Boston and Massachusetts.
Oh, definitely. They
And
have the pictures with all the high school teams and all
yeah, and I
that.
feel like, if you go in there and sit at the bar, like it doesn't matter if you're not from, Abington and you're out of 99 in Abington, you can speak the same language as
Yep.
everybody in there. And
Yeah.
so yeah, so I guess I'd have to go with that.
Steak tips and French fries, I'm guessing, or no?
I would always get the XL order of Gold Fever wings,
Okay.
chicken
Okay.
wing. Yeah,
A little bit of
boneless wings, fries. Keep it with that.
yeah, and the fries there are so good. So yeah, like
Yeah,
you said.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, man. So like to move on to the UFC side of your story, because I know you had like a little stint that you were like working at ESPNU. So like
yeah.
once you left ESPNU and like was it like legitimately right after that you got the Contender Series voice play by play commentating job, or was it one of
Yeah.
those that you kind of had to come in audition and pretty
Well,
much
I
work
had
for
to
your spot?
audition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to audition. I mean, the ESPN, that was a layoff in
Mhm.
April. ESPN axed a bunch of jobs. And I want to say a week later, I got laid off on, I believe it was a Wednesday. And I can't remember when I got the first like LinkedIn message from my boss now, but it was shortly after. It was like within a week. And he was just like, "Hey, I'd like to set up a phone call with you. Like, we're looking, just have some interest in what might be a possibility."
Mhm.
And proof that life, really does have a strange way of working out is like I got laid off. That's bad, right?
Mhm.
Like you're at ESPN, you get laid off, you're thinking, crap, like what's going to happen next? This is not good.
Mhm.
But right then, my boss now was keeping his eye on ESPN layoffs because they were starting the Contender Series and they needed broadcasters. They needed somebody to be the play-by-play guy for that show. And so, they were bringing in people for auditions. And then he was just like, well, ESPN's going to let a bunch of qualified people on the broadcast market. So the fact that I was like part of this news story of Brendan Fitzgerald is another one of the ESPN names let go, let him know that I was available. And so he just sent me an email. Like he saw I think he Googled me, found some stuff on YouTube of me hosting on ESPNU,
Mhm.
liked what he saw. And he was just like, all right, let's bring this guy in for an audition. So I was part of this kind of larger audition process for the Contender Series. They brought in like 12 people and had, auditions over several weeks of calling fights from a TV studio in Los Angeles. And yeah, that's how I got into the UFC gig. But it wasn't like awesome, let me go take this UFC job. It was like I got laid off, and then fortunately they were
Yeah.
looking for people, and the Contender Series was launching that summer, and that's how it worked.
And were you already a fan of the sport, or you kind of had to, in a hurry, kind of get familiar with the sport and know where it's going from there?
Yeah, I had to crash. Yeah, I wasn't really into it. I mean, I was the person who would watch it if it was on at a bar.
Hmm.
And if Conor McGregor's fighting, we would get it on our TVs at ESPN, or if Ronda Rousey was fighting, we'd get it on our TVs.
Hmm.
So I've, like my friends are, like some of my friends are now. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like they're not going to tune into every fight night card, but if Conor McGregor's fighting, they're probably going to end up at somebody's house that has the Conor McGregor fight, right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of funny how that all works. But no, it's like when you cover sports at a certain level, you all of a sudden, once you get to a high enough level, you don't have time to be a fan as much,
Hmm.
So like I was covering sports at ESPNU. That meant hosting college football shows every Saturday for like
Yeah.
halftime shows all day and then a highlight show for an hour at night. That leaves no time to sit there from 6 to 10 o'clock at night and watch UFC on FS1,
Yeah.
So it was weird. I didn't really understand how robust the schedule was and how many fighters there were and stuff. And at first I kind of felt bad about it, but then I'm just like, well, what was I going to do? I had to cover college sports. Like I
Yeah.
have to know everything about college football. That leaves no time to know anything about the UFC. And on the flip side now, I know nothing about college football anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I come to the UFC and it's like whole seasons of college football will go by and I'll be like, what happened? Oh, Alabama won again? Cool. I missed everything in between.
Yeah.
So that's just how it works.
It's crazy though. It's like a like moment you get so immersed into a sport. It's crazy how like legitimately everything else just kind of goes away and you're living in your own little world. So it's
Yeah.
insane. So
That's
like
something that I love about the UFC
yeah.
is you it's a very immersive thing, but there's so many different storylines all the time that you
Mhm.
don't think of it as boring. to me, I think of it as boring if I had to go back to doing highlights of basketball, football, baseball, hockey. If I just had to go like 3 inches deep on all these different sports, that's a lot more boring to me than really diving in and knowing a lot about one thing. So that's something I love about the job I have now.
Yeah, insane. And I mean, speaking about storylines, dude, like last week's event between Usman and Gilbert Burns and former teammates, that was just an insane card. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know if you ended up. I mean, I'm guessing, yeah, you did end up watching the every fight on the card, correct?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm off, I don't
Mhm.
watch like every single fight. The pay-per-view, I'm right in front, whatever. But like if
Mm,
I'm at home and my son's 5 and stuff like that, and
yeah,
I'm on West Coast time, so the first fight's at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
yeah,
So it's like I have it on, and what I'll do is like I'll be in the office, I'll watch the fight, and then like, okay, cool, I'll help make dinner or whatever. You know what I mean? And then like
yeah,
in between fight stuff. So it's not like I watch every single fight all the time when I'm not working, but
yeah.
I definitely catch up on the results and I watch as much of it as I can, and then for once it's like once it's main card time, then I'm locked in. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then, like you said, it's like you kind of had to fully immerse yourself into the sport. And we were kind of speaking off of it, like off air a little bit about you doing jujitsu. And like this is, I've always wanted to ask you like about like your jujitsu journey, because like what was it? I think it was the UFC post show with the one that you were doing with Izzy, and I think Izzy said something about like him being a white belt, and then you just try to fist pump him, and you're like, yeah, I'm a white belt too. Honestly,
Yeah.
that had me laughing for like a good 10 minutes. I'm like, I feel like that would probably be something I would do. So like, before we keep on going with your broadcasting journey, like I really want to ask you about your jujitsu journey. So like,
Yeah.
how did that go along? Like, what was your first day like? And was it kind of like
Yeah.
everyone that it's kind of like, dude, like,
You
how are they
get beat
doing this to
up.
me?
Right, right. So when I was with the UFC and it was pretty new, it was like 2017 was when I started. I think like in summer of 2018, we had moved to Las Vegas at that point, and I was just like, I should get into some martial art training or whatever. Like it would be fun to learn. Number one, it would be good to learn for my job, and good workout, whatever, right? Just a fun thing to do.
Mm,
So I actually didn't do jujitsu to start. I started with Muay Thai. Like I went to a Muay Thai class at Syndicate MMA, which is an MMA gym out here.
mm,
And I was just like, I don't want to roll around on the ground. I don't want to do that. Not for me. Like I'd rather hit a bag, work on the striking. To me, it's more glamorous, the
mm,
knockouts, the head kicks, like all that other stuff. So I did a Muay Thai class. That was cool. Like I didn't dislike it. I'd rather hit a heavy bag than get hit back.
yeah.
Again, not because I can't take it, because I don't want to show up on TV with a black eye. And so it's just like, if you go in class or something and some guy like, you know, is off, just whatever, doesn't have a job, who's on TV, doesn't
Yeah.
understand what I'm dealing with, it's like pops you in the mouth and you have a bloody lip on TV the next day. So I was just like, maybe I should chill on that or just do the heavy bag workout. And then I took a while off. Then I didn't do anything for like the next year, the winter. And head coach at Extreme Couture, Eric Nixick, just invited me in. He was just like, hey, dude, if you want to come train or something or learn or whatever, like always love to have people like you in. I think it's good for you. Like it's good for us. Like, just let me know, man. Come on in. I was like, yeah, thinking about doing jujitsu. He's just like, yeah, come on in. Like, try jujitsu. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna try it. And so I went in like last September of 2019 was my first one. And yeah, I can't particularly remember the first day other than like I was just like the gi is weird. It was much bigger
Yeah.
than I thought it was going to be and heavier. And I was just like, oh, like this is kind of an awkward garment to run around in and try to be athletic in.
Uh,
And I just remember like it's very strange to do the gi after watching a lot of no-gi in the MMA,
mm.
but like you're all of a sudden you're grabbing at a collar, right? You're using the gi against that person, or more accurately, they're using it against me, and so I'm getting like ragdolled by just like they're pulling my neck all over the
Yeah,
place,
yeah.
and slowly started to get it a little bit, and it's like, you okay, find another beginner that you're a little even with. I'm big. I'm like 6'1", 210, 215, so it's like I have size and I'm pretty athletic. So it's like at least I have that going for me and I
Mm.
can kind of be strong enough to fight some people off. And it just got to being like fight them off as long as you can and then like learn a little stuff, watch some YouTube videos, like learn, if you find yourself in the bottom of full mount, like I can kind of get out of that a little bit now. Like I
Yeah.
learned how to kind of get out of it. And yeah, so I started getting into it. Unfortunately, it just got short because, in February 2020, I just stopped
Yeah.
rolling because the pandemic was coming. And just with my role, like, I don't want to go into jiu-jitsu gym right now and then test positive, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden I'm out of the broadcast and really screws up our UFC productions. So I've just been staying safe and staying away from it, but it is something that I can't wait to get back into.
Yeah, no, definitely. And dude, you're calling the fights tomorrow. So, Derek Lewis and Curtis Blades. I know you can't do your predictions and all that because
Yeah.
obviously you're calling the fights and everything like that. But like, going into that fight though, like, what are you just expecting though? You're just expecting just straight up fireworks, two heavyweights going at it. Do you feel like it's gonna go to this decision? Like I said, I know you can't do
I don't
predictions,
think it'll
but
go. I can't make predictions on the fighter to win, but
yeah.
I don't think it's going to go to a decision. I mean, Derek Lewis has been in plenty of 5-round fights, and they've never touched the 5th round. He's only
Mhm.
gone to a 4th round twice. Like most of the time, his are ending inside the distance. I would be shocked if they went 5 rounds, honestly. And Curtis Blades has this reputation as like this wrestler, grinded out decision guy. He's only been to 4 decisions in 12 UFC appearances. Like he's aggressive when it gets on
Mhm.
the ground, and so I think we'll see something like 2nd, 3rd round. Honestly, I think they're gonna bring their best. Like Derek Lewis seems as motivated as ever, and Curtis Blades only lost to Francis Ngannou twice, and it's
Yeah.
like you're taking your life in your hands when you go in there with that guy. So Blades is
Mhm.
as good of a contender as we have in the division. He's as powerful, and like he's got the takedown record in the UFC in the heavyweight division by a lot, and like there's a lot of credentials on each side. So I think it's going to be a good fight, and I think we're getting a finish.
Definitely. And then besides that fight though, is there like one fight that you're like really looking forward to call on though? Like I know every fight on the card is awesome, but like one
Yeah.
fight that you're just kind of like, I have a feeling there's gonna be fireworks, and not everyone else is like on the same mindset. But in my head, I believe it's gonna be fireworks.
I think Nate Landwehr is one of the. I'm high on him. I think he has the perfect crowd pleasing style. Like he just doesn't give an F.
Yeah.
Like he's gonna go in there, he's gonna swing, he's gonna talk. Like he, he got knocked out in his UFC debut, and then like he comes back for a second fight, and he's like, I'd rather lose like that than lose some decision. He's
Mhm.
like, I'd rather throw caution to the wind, throw big shots, and then get caught with something on the other side instead of just like point fight on the outside and try to squeak out a 29-28. So Nate Landwehr is fighting Julian Erosa, and Erosa is a fun fighter too. He had a
Yeah.
great fight last time out with Sean Woodson. He had a great fight against Grant Dawson before that. He had a head kick knockout on Contender Series season 2 a few years ago. Didn't get the contract, but I was like really happy for him when he beat Sean Woodson in the Apex, because he had lost a few in a row, and it's like you're on borrowed time with the UFC at that point. But for him to get that win, I think he got a bonus that night for either fight of the night or performance of the night, and so you got a like exciting featherweights, which is a great weight class when they're all action, which these guys are. So that's the one.
Definitely, man, definitely. And yeah, man, before we go though, man, like what's one piece of advice that like I'm guessing that like, I've heard you give, pieces of advice to like on other
Yeah,
interviews, but like, if it's, would be something different to like up and coming broadcasters like myself and many others, like
yeah.
right now, and especially in today's day and age, what piece of advice would you give them to hopefully land an entry job? Because right now, in the midst of the pandemic, it's kind of a hard thing right now because obviously
Yeah.
not many places want to hire. But from what you think, what would be probably the best advice for people like me and many others?
So the easy advice is to like do what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Like the YouTube channel, the podcast, like that stuff, like that's just you should do it.
Mhm.
And what's funny is like what's my advice in this day and age? Like I don't know what it's like to be a 22-year-old broadcaster or wannabe broadcaster in this media age. YouTube was barely started. YouTube was for silly viral videos when I was
Yeah.
in college. It was not a platform to put literally anything you wanted, to have a sports show, to have a workout channel, to have anything. Um, so like for me, I just know that if I was in your shoes, like I would be doing what you were doing. I would be hosting some sort of podcast, some sort of sports show, get as many reps as possible to speak on camera, and to interview and to try to connect with people whose jobs. But like the more abstract advice I can give is I feel like my life really changed when I started reading books.
Mhm.
Reading books. And I kind of gravitate towards nonfiction, um, Mark Manson is a great author. Ryan Holiday is a great author. I like, nonfiction kind of personal development books is what but I just think when you start reading books, especially about life perspective or about kind of the bigger picture, I think you can kind of zone in a little bit more on what you actually want out of your
Mm,
life. And so it's easy to say like, I want to be a sports broadcaster. I want to make it to the top level.
mm,
But when you start reading more about life perspective and getting more of a handle of like where you are, then it's easier to zone in on what you actually want. Like, okay, I don't want to just be a sports broadcaster. I would like to host an interview show about MMA.
mm,
I would like to be a play-by-play announcer for hockey. Like, or I would like to be a reporter that does long form documentary stories for E60 on ESPN or HBO Sports or whatever.
mm.
Like once you start opening yourself up to more things about life, then the more you'll realize how much you want something and what you actually want. And Heidi Andral told me, because I had her on my podcast recently, and she's a reporter with a lot of experience. And I kind of asked her, I was like, "What do you tell broadcasters as advice?" Because I was interested, because a lot of times I am lost. It's just like,
Mm,
yeah, start the YouTube channel. That's okay. That's not really helping me. You already did that.
mm,
But she was her advice was find your why. Like find out why you want to do it, and then once you know why you want to do it, then naturally that will lead to a more detailed approach to what you actually want to do and then how to get there.
mm.
So my thing is like read books. I think that it's never bad for you. It's only good for you. A lot of people don't do it because they waste their time on social media and video games and all these other things. They're like, I don't
Yeah.
have time to read. But it's time well spent, and you'll have a leg up on all these people that don't do it.
Mm.
And it'll lead to just improvement in all areas.
Definitely, man. Well said. And once again, man, I really appreciate the time. I mean, it's an absolute honor to be talking to you. I mean, like every UFC fight night, I always see you, and I'm just there, like, man. Like I told you from the start, this man has the coolest job in the world. So yeah,
Yeah, it is pretty cool, I have to say that.
yeah. So before we go, man, do you want to drop down your social media? I know you also have a podcast as well that people
Yeah.
watching this can go and watch.
Yeah, sure. Brendan Fitz TV is the social media handle on Twitter and Instagram. And my podcast is called Fitz Nation. You can listen to it anywhere you can listen to podcasts. My YouTube channel is just my name, Brendan Fitzgerald. That has the podcast on there and some other clips and stuff like that. So yeah, just starting to build it up slowly. I started a couple years ago, and it was like really sporadic at first, and then since like last September, I started putting some more effort into it, and it's fun. It's just like a fun little side project to it's funny because when you're in Wyoming in those small markets, you have to do it all yourself.
Mm,
And you're like, I can't wait to work at like ESPN so I can have some help. And
yeah.
now I'm at like UFC where I have all the resources and assistance in terms of our production team. And here I am. I want to go back and start my own show and do it all again.
Yeah.
So as long as you enjoy the process, I guess you're in the right line of work. So I do.
Definitely, man. So, Brendan, once again, thank you so much. And to everyone watching, peace.